I've said many times before that nuance is the name of the game. And so today I want to provide a middle ground for an issue that I believe typically people err on the extremes of. And I don't want to overgeneralize myself right now, but if we're just looking at kind of the two camps of belief or not belief, both of these camps utilize talking points along this argument to make their case while ignoring that nuance in the middle. And so I want to do a deep dive into this today. And for this reaction episode, I think we have the perfect video to use as a jumping off point.
When you start to study and understand brain development, as I did, you have to, meaning I don't care if you're an atheist, agnostic, or believer in creator, you have to step back and just go, wow. Then, of course, there's this difference among scientists as to who believes in God, who doesn't. I'll just go on record. I'm very comfortable saying it. I believe in God. I do. I think there are many things that science can explain. There are certain things science can't explain, but I'll even go a step further, which is that all the elements of science are entirely compatible with the idea of there being a God. And I'm not the first scientist to say this. I mean, Einstein believed in God. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists ever, clearly believed in God. There are many atheist scientists. There are agnostic scientists who are just kind of like unsure, right? For me, I'm in absolute awe of biology.
Now, there's a lot of things that I like about Huberman, and I think he's pretty fair in most of this video. He has looked deep into the inner workings of the mind, and he comes out with a sense of awe. And what many people do with that sense of awe when they can't explain it to some natural phenomenon is they go supernatural. Where else is there left to go? And so Huberman says he believes in God, and that's totally fine. To my knowledge, he hasn't attributed it to a specific God, and that's part of this nuance as well. Many times the Christian or the Muslim or whatever religion will make this same kind of argument. It's an argument from complexity or from design and say, there has to be a creator. And then they just jump the gap straight to, and it's my God. That obviously has issues with it. So I actually agree with Huberman here more than I probably disagree. But he's also only telling one side of the story. And so those are the two things I want to talk about today. Where do I agree and where do I disagree? If that sounds interesting to you, please stick around for today. Also consider joining the Patreon. I don't bring this up a bunch, but it helps more than you know. And to all of you who have been making monthly donations, I can never say thank you enough. So if you like what I do on the channel here, there is a link in the description below. But otherwise, thank you so much just for watching or sharing, commenting, liking, all of it. So this first category, what do I agree with here with Huberman? I too have an unbelievable appreciation the more that I learn about the universe, the human body, the world that we live in. And I'd like to go through some of those specific examples with you. Oftentimes, I think atheists are far too scared to talk about how much we appreciate these things because it opens the door for that. Well, then don't you understand? If we're this complex, if it's this beautiful, doesn't that point to a designer? But no, it doesn't have to. And I want to first talk about the beauty I see in the world. We can start with what Huberman was talking about, the brain. The brain is unbelievable. I just finished like my 5th book on split brain syndrome, and I cannot stop being fascinated about everything that entails. I probably have 20 or 25 books on the brain alone in my library. Our brain has billions of neurons and trillions of synaptic connections that, for all we understand, is exactly what enables consciousness, houses memories, creates emotion. Everything that we have ever thought or observed or seen or cared about or felt happened right here. That's crazy. One of the ones Christians love to point to recently is the complexity of the DNA code. And you know what? They're right. Not about what it represents or the fact that Yahweh is spelled out in it, but that this stores a crazy amount of information. It codes for life itself. It stores itself and passes its information down. The fact that this has happened is absolutely stunning and mind-boggling. The cosmos. Oh my gosh. We could talk about this for 15 hours. The beauty of the galaxies, the different shapes the galaxies can take. Stars, planets, distance, mass, energy, dark matter, black holes, or supernovae, let alone all the theories of multiverse or time travel. And even there, we understand understand and have observed next to nothing. What grandeur lays out there that we cannot even fathom? I was explaining or trying to explain to my son the other day photosynthesis. The complexity of photosynthesis in plants is extremely fascinating. A sophisticated biochemical process that allows plants of all kinds to eat the sun, a free gift of energy in the sky. While all of us animals are just running around eating each other to stay alive, plants just open up and absorb. What a thing that is. And by the way, if you need a surefire way to get more awe in your life, have kids and never stop them from asking questions. I don't care if it's the 813th question of the day. Let them ask and help them learn. I am constantly rereading things and looking things up and watching videos or reading articles with my kids, and I am just as wide-eyed as they are. We could talk about the biodiversity of life here on just this planet, let alone the idea that surely there's life on other planets. From the tiniest little microorganism to the largest of mammals, to things that can survive in extreme heat or in extreme cold, things that are precious and delicate, to things that are hardy and endure, adapted to all kinds of conditions across just this one planet. It's unbelievable. And I could go on and on. We could talk about the human eye, the immune system, quantum mechanics, the human genome, the circulatory system, cellular machinery. Are you kidding me? Have you seen how the little robots in our body essentially operate? Or symbiosis, or the human microbiome, epigenetics, or plant communication. I finished my third book on fungi the other day, and oh my gosh, if you would have told me a few years ago that the most interesting thing to me right now would be fungi, I would have laughed in your face. I'm sure many of you know, but just the way that trees communicate with each other through this underground internet, warning each other, sending the hurt ones extra nutrients, like it is beyond amazing. This world gets more interesting every single day to me. And even me, even with this kind of channel that I run, I still fall into the trap of thinking to myself, man, there's just got to be a creator. And maybe there is, fair enough. But here's some of the ways that one can go wrong about that. First, I didn't like Huberman's pointing to Carl Jung or Einstein as, look, they're scientists who believe, as if that means something. Now, I don't think he was trying to make a very strong case with that, but if you haven't heard in the apologetics community how many people have pointed to very brilliant men saying, hey, look, they're way smarter than you, they're way smarter than me, and their intellect led them to believe in God. Well, let's be fair, because especially for all the Christian apologists or Muslim apologists who do this, they seem to stop short. Just using the Einstein example. Yes, Einstein was a genius. And yes, he had understanding into our cosmos that few others have had, especially considering his time and place. And when asked, do you know how Einstein described his spirituality? A cosmic religious feeling. He critiqued dogma. He rejected a personal God consistently. And when pressed, he said, I believe in Spinoza's God. Spinoza was a philosopher that believed in a form of pantheism, not a personal deity, but a sum of the natural laws, not a God who concerns himself with the personal ongoings of its creation. So how disingenuous every time you hear an apologist of a particular religion point to Einstein as some kind of proof or evidence that the wiser or more intelligent one is, the more sure they are that a God exists, let alone a specific God. No. And I might not go as far as Einstein. I think that's where agnosticism fits so well. We simply don't know. We simply can't know. A second reason this fails to continue to its natural conclusion, and this is the thought that always follows that doubt I have of, wait, am I wrong? Doesn't this absolutely have to point to some kind of designer or creator? And it is the simplest thought in the entire world. And it is beyond obvious once you've recognized it. But I went 30 years without recognizing it. So either I'm really stupid or it is really easy to miss. And so I want to just say it as clearly as possible for you. And the thought is, if something being so amazing, so complex, so beautiful, so designed, which is already unfair to say, or having at least the perception of design, requires something bigger, something more intelligent, then wouldn't also that thing require something bigger and more intelligent? And you get yourself into an infinite regress of gods. Now, of course, the apologists have an answer for this, and that is to stop short with God. This God is outside of space and time. Yes, things require a first cause, but they sneak a tricky little word into their syllogism for the Kalam argument. Anything that begins to exist. Well, first of all, we don't know that the universe began to exist. We can track time for about 13.8 billion years, and we may very well be wrong on that. In fact, the James Webb Telescope is kind of giving us an indicator that's a lot older than that. I'm very open to science being wrong. I also understand that science is okay with being wrong. Science wants to prove wrong what is wrong and continue to find what fits or works best. And so even though it's not perfect, it's a much better system than trusting a few thousand-year-old book and saying it got everything right then, one time, and forever. No. But just saying everything that begins to exist, so you can talk about our universe in this simplistic way, requires a first cause, and then jumping that first cause has to be our conception of a God, and then stopping and saying that God, even though more complex, doesn't require its own God because it started outside of space and time, has got to be the very definition of special pleading. Being outside of space and time is the biggest nothing statement in the world. It is something that philosophers, specifically theologians, had to create to fit their God in without immediately contradicting themselves. The Christian idea that there is a God that has always been, or a God that is not subject to the same definitions or requirements that you put on everything else, is an unnecessary level of complexity. Let's just say the universe has either always been or came from nothing. Why add the unnecessary layer of God just to stop there? You either have to go all the way back, or if you're going to pick an arbitrary point to stop at, you pick the earliest point, universe. Case closed. And none of it satisfies. I understand that. I'm not claiming that we know anything. I'm claiming the opposite. We don't know. So let's stop pretending like we do. Let's stop utilizing these talking points about our own ignorance to somehow do the opposite and claim perfect truth and knowledge. Like, do you see how wrong it gets so quickly? And this is a very simple video, and this is nothing new. I'm just trying to communicate it to you in a way that I wish had been earlier communicated to me. And my last little portion that I wanted to cover today is for everything that is so beautiful and awe-inspiring and amazing that can make one second guess or picture a creator. There is so much flaw and harm and brokenness as well. To the point, without getting too deep into the problem of suffering or evil or anything like this, that if there is a God, if there is some version of a higher power that had some kind of purpose or design or creation, it stopped right there, and it wasn't perfect. When we talk about the human body, on the positive side, we talk about the brain, the trillions of connections. But why don't we also talk about back pain? Why don't we also talk about the appendix or wisdom teeth? Things that point to much more naturalistic explanations, and also an imperfect creator if there was one. When we talk about the biodiversity of life or the amazing natural architecture of our world, why do we not talk about genetic disorders, diseases, natural disasters, predatory behavior, parasites, and extinctions? And I'm being really vague, but let's be a little more specific. Let's take some of those exact things that we talked about on the plus side and consider their negative attributes. Sure, the human eye is super complex, but what about the blind spot created when the optic nerve passes through the retina, leading to a small gap in the visual field? Or what about all the people with eyesight problems, like cataracts or myopia or blindness? I'm not trying to tear anything down. I'm just saying you can't have your cake and eat it too. You cannot just point to the wonderful things and completely ignore all the problems. The immune system is amazing. It is a feat of evolution that rivals almost anything else, but it also malfunctions often and in horrific ways. For anyone here that has had any kind of chronic pain or an autoimmune disease, lupus or arthritis, or even, and simple enough, allergies. An allergy is our immune system responding inappropriately to a non-harmful substance. Kind of takes the wind out of the sails there a little bit. And similar, I mentioned the human genome is something that is absolutely fascinating, except when genetic mutations can lead to horrendous diseases like Huntington's, sickle cell anemia, cystic fibrosis. Are we giving credit to the designer for those? I don't think so. The circulatory system is amazing, but you know what the number one cause of death is? Cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and strokes. And sure, the formation of the stars and planets is beautiful, and when when we look out from Earth in a nice dark field and see the twinkling stars, it says something of beauty to us, but those stars, many of them are dead. Many of them have exploded, destroying their entire solar systems or being swallowed up by black holes. Space is vast and beautiful and awe-inspiring, but it is also terrifying and uninhabitable and mysterious and deadly. Just thinking of what I mentioned before, I talked about cellular machinery. Yes, crazy. But when it goes bad, you get cancer. I mentioned symbiosis, which is awesome, but it's one step away from becoming parasitic, and that can harm one or both of the organisms that we're benefiting. Our human microbiome is amazing. We're calling it the second brain. We're understanding so much about it, and yet the very things that save our lives, like antibiotics, destroy our biome, or the very conditions that many people have to eat unfavorable, cheap, poor, terrible diets also destroy the microbiome. Are we including all those factors, or are we just pointing out the one good part? Plant communication is pretty cool. Remember what I was talking about with the underground internet and trees helping each other out? They're helping their kin out. They're under the same selective pressures we are. And just like us, they're willing to harm, destroy, and kill, outcompete, essentially, neighboring plants of different species, competing fiercely for resources, and sometimes even releasing chemicals that inhibit the growth of, again, their competition. Communication, but also combat, just like us. And I could go on and on and on, but I think you guys get the point here. I mean, we could list 130 problems with the human body in under 2 minutes. Things that, if there really was a perfect designer who had an intention of creating us perfectly, would be very, very different. But we can also explain it from a naturalistic phenomenon of evolution about how and why we got here, why these organisms have been doing the best with what they have, but no more. We're not a perfect design. We're intricate. We're amazing. That's what long periods of time will do for you. But we're also pretty broken. Some amalgamation of parts that can barely fit together and sometimes not very well. I'm actually going to save some of this because I'm going to do a whole video on the difference between evolution and intelligent design. And I'm going to give you example after example with videos and pictures and details and articles of all the different species that, because of the evolutionary pressures that got them to where they are in an immense amount of pain or end up killing themselves or all kinds of other horrendous things. I don't want to give away the video, but trust me when I say, for anyone out there that says, look how beautifully and perfectly designed we are, and thus God, and thus my specific God, there's a 10-to-1 ratio of cases against it when just looking at the facts of nature. So, is Huberman fair in saying what he is saying? Yeah, sure, to a degree. Anyone is allowed to believe whatever they want for whatever reason. But what I find to be most attractive is a kind of consistency that isn't trying to be pessimistic or negative or steal everyone's fun, but is willing to be accurate with its assessment in, okay, well, if these things are amazing, can we also point out the fact that they come with some kind of inherent baggage or can often produce the exact opposite? For everything that looks designed, there is something that looks completely broken. For everything that looks beautiful, it can also be ugly. For everything that looks beneficial, it can also be dangerous and horrendous. And if we put all this together, sure, we can talk about maybe there's a creator. That's totally fair. But what we cannot get to, getting back to the point of this channel, is jumping all the way to my specific deity that I know loves me and has a plan for me and cares for me and made me on purpose. You just can't get there if you're consistent, if you're intellectually honest. Problem is, many people don't know all this, and I'm not claiming to be some beacon of knowledge. Luckily, I've had an interest in reading, and there's been a byproduct of learning. I've been exposed to a lot of different things, both good and bad, to the degree of which I'm able to say, okay, if there's a God, it simply cannot be the kind of God that people want it to be or claim it to be. And that's why I'm always so careful to leave room for that Spinoza's God, for that agnosticism. But it's just as likely that there's more to the universe we don't understand. It's just as likely that we're in a simulation. It's just as likely that we are in some high school student's lab experiment in the future. And I'm not even saying you have to buy into or believe that, but you have to leave room for it the same way that you expect people to leave room for maybe God did it. And then it just becomes a numbers game, and they're not favorable when it comes to a personal God. In fact, they're downright abysmal. I am making a case not even so much against particular gods, because I don't believe any of these gods exist. I'm making cases against religion because I think religion is harmful. I think there is a baggage that comes with believing in these personal gods, these specific holy books, these tenets of supposed truth, when we have so much evidence against them and so much awareness of everything else that could be going on. that's it. So I hope you found this interesting today. I know some of it was probably redundant information to you, but when I saw this video from Huberman, I thought, man, I get that. I really, really get that. And I think many of you get that. And especially if you're a recent deconvert, especially from fundamentalism, this kind of stuff can like really mess with you. So instead of telling you, no, that's stupid, there's no way, it's only science all the time, we know everything. No, we don't. Nuh-uh. But it doesn't mean you just arrive back at your original indoctrinated religion. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments. I'll see you Thursday for 2 Timothy. And until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Boris, GVI, Jacob, Joe, Kitboga, Martin, Oliver, Perry, Rokkit, and Shawn, my Humanist heroes, Imposter, James, Jarrod, and Kristi, my Atheist advocates, Caleb, Jeff, Jeffrey, Karen, Maggie, Paul, Sparky, and Todd, as well as all of my secular scholar patrons. If you believe in the mission of the channel or you just enjoy the content, please consider joining these fine people.